I'm Jeff Stormer, and I host Party of One, an actual play podcast focused on two-player role-playing experiences. Every week, I sit down with a friend.
J.R. Goldberg.
Alvaro, a.k.a. Wormtooth, formerly MC Blackwolf.
Danny Costello.
My name's Rich Howard.
I'm Sharung Biswas.
We play a two-player role-playing game. We share some laughs.
An absolute blast to play.
It was a delight to run my game with someone who got so into it.
It was so easy to do.
Seeing the creativity just blossom right in front of my eyes.
Maybe a few tears.
I've never had a game make me question my previously staunch moral compass.
Jeff makes the greatest serial killer.
And we have a really good time.
It's a great way to take a chance on a new role-playing game.
Truly exemplifies what is wonderful about a game with just two people driving the narrative together.
You can find new episodes every Tuesday at partyofonepodcast.com.
My name is Aram, my pronouns are he, him, and welcome to Godsfall.
My name is Michael Loving, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm playing Aryunavar, level 1 Elven Wizard.
Last time on Godsfall, Aryunavar, a lower noble from the Elven and Dwarven separatist kingdom of Rylend, set out on a secretive expedition to the jungles of southern Brenus. Traveling on a pair of fog cutters, they seek a fabled world gate, and have brought along a small crew of elves, dwarves, and a blind stone giant known as Vogon. With elves, it's interesting because we're not cycling with night and day.
Right.
Elves rest. They take a time to mediate for 4 hours.
Meditate.
It's not a collective thing. It's not like the sun goes down and elves get tired. It's just not how they function.
Right.
So I would imagine that you guys are taking a 4-hour rest because it has been a long journey and you're tired because of the long journey. And as long as you've hit a point where you're at a bit of a setback, you might as well take a break.
Right.
Think about things and move on in a very elven way, right? Not just hurl yourself back in.
Yeah.
Consider what's happened, reevaluate, meditate on that, and head back in.
Right.
Very elven way of doing it. So that's what you're doing right now. The elves are just kind of gathered around quietly.
Well, and Hevra and Vogon probably need to rest a bit because it's been...
Vogon's kind of quiet anyway, so Vogon very kind of just retreats back into wherever Vogon goes. Hevra looks a little... tired, but frustrated because the dwarves don't like this about the elves. They never have. It's always something where the dwarves pride themselves in general on being hardy, right? But
that makes sense.
But they have to sleep, and the elves don't have to sleep. So it's this weird thing where they...
And even when we do sleep, we're technically just meditating, so we're still kind of conscious of what's going on.
Right, and it's only for 4 hours where the dwarves need 8, just like everyone else, right? And so the dwarves, it kind of feels like, especially on a mission like this, and especially when there's only one dwarf, like she would be slowing them down.
Right.
Right? So she's trying to tough it out. Like she's yawning, but she's still she's just like taking a power nap. So that's where you are. So what would you be doing during this time, but right before meditation?
I would. There's not a whole lot to do, right? I'd probably, sketch something.
Notes. Yeah, fill in your map a bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're kind of sitting and working on that.
I'll watch the clearing and see if any other life approaches this clearing, if there's any signs that it's like sentient, or if this is just like basically some sort of almost like an environmental, like basically one of those like is it pitcher pot flowers? Like if this is just basically like a giant, just like a giant pitcher pot flower where something walks in to drink the water and then just falls into the acid and gets digested.
So you're a little bit away from the camp, just a bit, but it's such a thick forest that you may as well be a couple 100 feet away, right? So you're just at the edge of this and you're watching. And as you're watching, you do observe activity that would suggest it's some sort of plant like that. A couple deer, like a family of deer, come out of the jungle at some point, or deer-like creatures, right? And walk over to the water to drink, and all walk over fine and drink. And on the way back, one of them half falls in, manages to get itself out, but only one. So apparently the plant is making decisions, perhaps, choosing to allow some to drink and then try to eat others in order to keep enticing them back. I mean, there's a level of decisions being made here that isn't immediately apparent.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. And I say after a couple hours, you hear the groan of a tree as Vogan pushes his way over to you and just kind of stops and looms over you.
He looms over me. Like I imagine like I'm like up in the tree, like
at eye level,
like 30 feet. yeah. And then, like Vogan walks up, and I still have to look up at him, even though I'm like 20 feet up a tree or whatever.
16 to 18 feet tall, around there.
They're not like storm giants or something where
you're not far up a tree. You're just far enough to get up off the ground to have a slightly better view. So you're like 10 feet up, 12 feet up.
Off the ground and out of range of, your standard, terrestrial predators.
So he's still a good like 4 or 5 feet taller than you.
I'll sit there and I'll kind of look over at him.
And he kind of leans down, and his eyes are like milky white, right? And they don't focus. And he kind of leans down, but it feels like he's looking. He has this weird way of making it feel like he's looking directly at you, and he's doing that now. And he kind of leans down. And he's just looking at you, but not saying anything.
Evening, Vogan.
He lifts a hand and he reaches towards you.
I'll put my hand on or in his, depending on if he's palm up or palm down.
He grabs your forearm tightly with a very strong grip, not enough to harm you, but surprising.
Okay.
And holds your forearm and doesn't move, and your whole like underside of your forearm begins to grow warm.
Painfully or just
uncomfortable, not painful, but startling.
Okay. All right. I'll wait till it hurts.
So you show patience, right? And it begins to glow in between his fingers. You can see your skin glowing between the cracks of his fingers. And he doesn't let go of you, but with his other finger, he points further into the jungle past the clearing, and there's another glow, maybe a mile in, coming from the jungle and then straight up through the clouds. And you can see the clouds kind of part as this glow, like this sliver, maybe, like a needle of light that comes out of the jungle to the clouds, parts them, and then vanishes into the sky. And he lets go of your arm. The glow goes away. It was only there for an instant, but that goes away. The glow on your arm goes away, but as it's vanishing, you can see the outline of a sword on your forearm just before it vanishes back into flesh. And then Vogan just turns around and starts to lumber back towards the campsite.
Is it the same direction that we're going?
Yes.
Okay.
It's gonna take you a couple days to get to this thing.
Oh, okay.
So let's say this is your first day's journey. So you are one third of the way in.
Sure.
And whatever you just saw would be at the halfway point if you just started.
Okay. So it's still like hours away.
Yes, correct.
From where, okay. So not like, oh yeah, it's like a few hundred yards, like you could walk over there in 5
check
minutes
it out and come
go
back.
check it out.
No, you'd be gone for way too long.
Right. Yeah. And be way removed from any form of backup if I needed it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was going to say, if it's like a couple minutes away, I think about doing something dumb and leaving the rest of the party to go check it out. But
yeah,
if it's still another, if it's still another couple of hours,
yeah,
no.
Smart move.
I will note this strange experience. You said there was like a sword mark on my arm?
There was. It faded. So it glowed. So when he moved his hand, there was an outline of a sword glowing on your arm. And just for a moment, you saw it until it faded back into nothing.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Was it a recognizable sword design? Was it like a short sword, a scimitar?
It was a long, straight sword. You would estimate a long sword, something that could be used with one or two hands. Very, traditional and straight, edged on both sides, that kind of thing. Yeah, with with a proper pommel and guard.
That's interesting. There's a weird question that will probably end up getting cut from the podcast because it's super not interesting. Is the sword is it just like a basic like pictograph of a sword, or is it?
It's a basic outline, and then everything within that outline, like it's a silhouette. So it was just a glowing block in the shape of a sword. Right.
It'd be like if you or I like drew a sword on a piece of paper. That's what it looked like. It wasn't super detailed, so I couldn't say like it's like this is a Roman sword or a Viking sword or a.
It was, just based by the fact that it was a long straight blade edged on both sides, or at least it looked to be with a point. You could make a bunch of inferences off of that. But as far as like heavy detail, no, you couldn't tell. But like for instance, that the elves that you're traveling with tend to use shorter curved blades, and so this isn't like one of theirs. Like you could little things like that you could tell.
Yeah, or it could just be Vogun just communicating something like there's a sword over there, and that's just the image of a sword that he used. So.
Or it could have nothing to do with a sword whatsoever, and it's just
it could have nothing to do with a sword whatsoever.
Yeah,
who knows?
So what do you do for the rest of the period? Do you rest? Do you talk to anyone? Or
I'll probably just go back to my hammock and I'll keep watch for a little while, because I imagine the elves probably take shifts, because the dwarf's going to have to sleep for 8 hours.
The elves do take shifts, but there are 3 scouts and Commander Siora, so you guys aren't on watch. So you don't, frankly, trust you to be on watch. Right? You don't do this; they do this.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just because I have time, I'll stay awake for a chunk of it and just kind of like listen to what I can hear, see what I can see, make sure there aren't like dragons flying over us or anything like that. You live in this giant jungle.
So as you're doing that, I'd like you to roll perception.
I rolled another 4 plus 2 is 6. I need to stop using this die.
So you are really into this flower you are drawing. It's got a particular color and bent and size that is just fascinating. And you're now collecting some of the leaves, right, and some of the petals to press in between your pages and make sure you have. And as you're doing that, one of the scouts is just suddenly behind you and just scares the shit out of you. It's definitely the youngest person on your mission. He is slight, dark hair, dark eyes, quiet, very focused on what he does in kind of an unsettling way. What is this elf's name?
Hanriel.
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 Hanriel. Hanriel. Hanriel. I like it. Okay. So Hanriel looks at your drawings and nods. What have you seen in these woods?
I'll gesture over to the weird pitcher plant trap.
Right.
Is he one of the ones that got like half eaten by it, or no?
No, he was the third one. He's always the one in the back.
All right. This plant that tried to eat us. It let some deer drink from the pitcher in the middle. Very odd. It seems like it's capable of selectively choosing its targets. Not something I would expect from vegetation.
Hanriel is nodding, but is clearly already looking towards the clearing, searching for the deer, because that's the part he found interesting about this. The rest of it he does not care about.
Yeah.
And then he kind of looks back at your drawings. My lord, why are you here?
Do you want the official or the unofficial reason?
He shrugs. Either seems to be would be enough to satisfy him.
The crown needed something to do with me, and it seemed like a valuable use of my time.
The wood elves or wild elves of Rylend, they tend to the more hardcore ones stick to the woods. They just stay in the woods, and he is certainly one of the more hardcore ones. He's one of the crunchy granola wild elves, if we're gonna have one. And he seems to be like nodding with you, like he has no love for the crowd of Rylend. He thinks their priorities aren't quite aligned with his, so he's nodding and listening. And he looks towards the clearing again. I expect to find answers of where my path shall lead. Do you seek those?
I seek answers for all of us, Hanriel.
He nods again, and he looks back towards the opening one more time, and he leans into you, and he whispers, the motivations for all of us are not always the path. And he leans back, he nods one more time, and he walks back to continue his watch.
What did he say to me?
The motivations for all of us are not always the path.
Okay.
And a couple hours later, it's still pretty dark. So, but it takes an hour or so to pack everything up. So I'd say by the time you're finally ready to go, there's just the first hints of light, just enough where with your elven eyes, it should be easy travel through even the thickest jungle.
Okay. And what's the plan for the rest of camp? Are they just waiting for us to come back?
Yeah, basically they're just continuing to set up camp. There has to be a base camp.
Okay.
Where because they would probably expect at some point to maybe need more supplies. It just depends what they find. If you guys find the arch, that is your goal, to get some sort, just like a visual, like, okay, that is the arch, and then come back and say, yes, we have an arch.
Okay.
And keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
That's basically your only goal here, is to confirm there's an arch and then continue to set up camp. Because if there isn't, I mean, you'll go in and search, and if you don't find one, you'll come back out and they'll keep trying. But if they don't find an arch, if they can't confirm it, you're going to leave. You're not going to stay here.
So they're anticipating that we're going to be gone for a few days.
And there's magical ways for them to communicate with each other. So every night, Commander Asura at least would certainly be checking in with the base at camp.
Either she's got a sending stone or...
She has a tiny silver raven.
Okay.
And it's this little charm. It's always sitting on her desk, and it's posed kind of like the little statue that comes out of a Rolls Royce. If like a bird was posed like that, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then she just she taps it on the beak, and it wakes up. And she tells it what she wants to say, and then it just goes and flies away and flies directly to whoever she's sending it to.
Okay.
And also she can give it little rolled up pieces of paper.
Sure.
So she'll always be like bringing you like these long scrolls that are very narrow for you to fill out information and like redo your drawings into, so she can send them with the bird, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're not really expecting us to come back until we finish this task.
Correct.
So I guess we just keep pressing on. If we're going to head in the direction that we saw that shaft of light, then I'll definitely be like on the lookout for that. If it looks like we're not going to go that way, since Vogun is, I guess, leading the charge here, I'll see if he's automatically steering us that way.
Sure.
And if he's not, I'll ask him if he wants to.
Vogun seems to be very eager to keep going.
Okay.
And is keeping a pretty brisk pace, even through all this underbrush. And it's like, it is a challenge to keep up with him.
Right.
But you do. And the scouts certainly have no issue. And eventually, you realize that he is taking you in the direct path of what you were looking at earlier. So it almost feels like you're heading for that as opposed to the mountain.
Okay. I was guessing based on his dossier that I was given at the start that there's probably some sort of potent magical rock over this direction. So,
which would make sense for what you're looking for. So, I mean,
right. Yeah, exactly.
If
so,
this is where the dowsing
we'll
rod
him.
is looking, if this is where your 18-foot tall dowsing rod is pointing, I guess you're going to go that way.
Our dowsing elephant is just guiding us.
Right. If the tusks would cross.
Right. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
So you're walking for a while, and it tends to be pretty quiet. Aside from the fact you have a stone giant with you, it tends to be pretty quiet when you guys are searching. You all just kind of fall into your own routines and into your own thoughts. And eventually you realize that you're hearing another voice. And we weren't quite sure at first. There's a lot of noises in this jungle that are strange.
Uh-huh.
There's definitely a species of bird that mimics things that it hears and has already been, the ones that are at the edge of your camp have already been heard mimicking your speech, the speech of the others around you. So at first you were thinking it was just those birds, but eventually you realize that it's a different voice entirely. It's a voice you haven't heard before, and it has a power and a weight to it that is strange and enticing and regal, and it seems to be getting louder the more you move in this direction.
And is it speaking a language that I can understand, or is it just
bits of it, like if it was a very old Elven, where it feels like there's parts of your language here and parts of it that are older. It's kind of, and you're only like half hearing it at this point. Like it's in, like there are muted echoes all around you, and it keeps shifting and moving, so it's hard to make out. But you are picking up words.
Okay.
You pick up the words 5 kingdoms, Jacob, and you pick up the word sword.
Okay. That catches my interest. Once I clue into the fact that this isn't just the birds, I'm going to kind of slowly drop back to where Beatrice is.
She was kneeling down when you walked up, and as she stands up, both her hands are caked in this slimy mud, and she's got her hands like right up to her face, and she's looking really carefully at both of her hands, and both of her hands have one of those stones in them.
Yeah.
You embedded it in the mud, so they're glowing in the mud, so she can kind of like look at it and look into it. And as soon as she sees you, she just thrusts both palms directly in front of your face, like she's showing you an iPhone, and she's like, "Look!" And there's colors and patterns, and they just look thick with like insects and little bugs that are swarming together, almost like if it's a whole mud made from bugs.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what color's the mud? If it's blue, I'm not getting anywhere near that shit.
No, it's not. It's not a shimmering blue. It's kind of like, well, you would know this.
Bite me in the ass in 6 episodes.
It's like that baby shit green brown. You would probably know this pretty well.
Yeah,
that's what it looks like.
Yeah,
smells like that too.
Oh, good. Yeah, that weird mix of like weird like vegetable matter and also poop. Yeah.
Right. Yes, exactly.
I'll kind of take a step to the side and be like, that's lovely, Bay. Are you hearing anything interesting?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I'm hearing. There's so many birds and those weird repeating birds. A lot of those, and the insects. The mud's really loud. The trees have their own. I mean, there's so many things to hear. Yeah.
No words, though. Nothing.
Words.
Particularly unusual.
It's the birds. It's the birds. We were hearing them earlier. I mean, I know it's weird. They say the things we say back, but it's just the birds. Ari, she shouldn't call you Ari.
Yeah.
What did we say she called you?
Probably Aryun.
Aryun. It's just the birds, Aryun. Throws the mud to the ground in one hand, and she still slaps you on the shoulder with a muddy hand because she knows it doesn't matter.
Right.
Right? It'll just like with her, it'll just fall right off you. It won't stick to you. So there's kind of a casualness, right?
It sticks on me and then kind of just slowly starts like going away like invisible ink or something. Like
I would imagine it was a constant joke that you guys would just purposely muddy each other as a joke. Yeah.
Just deliberately like
just puts a big handprint right on your chest and runs it down.
Yeah.
Because why not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she just kind of teasingly was like, "It's just the birds. Don't worry."
Okay. So obviously she's not hearing the same things that I'm hearing.
Or is it paying attention?
She is, yeah, I was going to say, or if she is, she's not paying attention to them and hasn't noticed.
That is a problem with her. She's very alert, very aware when she's focused on something. She's unbeatable. But if it's not something she's focused on, Vogon could walk right past her and she wouldn't even notice.
Yeah, I like that idea that she's just completely oblivious. I'm going to move up to the commander.
Aryunavar, do you have a question?
Last night, while we were resting, Vogon and I witnessed some kind of... I hesitate to call it a light show, but that seems like it's what it was, in the direction we're heading.
And she looks over at you, like kind of sideways at you, and she looks back at Vogun, and then back to you. Well, I expect Vogun to say nothing, but I'm surprised this is the first I'm hearing of this.
There wasn't anything that made the light that I could see. I didn't hear any dangerous creatures, but it seems that it's directly in our path. I simply wished to clue you in case there was something to be mindful of. And as I say that, I'm going to cast Mage Armor.
Okay.
Because it lasts for 8
sure,
hours.
Why not?
You know?
Fuck it, right?
Yeah.
I'd cast it every goddamn morning my whole life.
Yeah.
All right. And she sees that and nods, and she puts a hand up and she whistles in a very intricate way. You've seen this. You've seen all of the scouts communicating this way to each other.
Right.
So she does, like, the first whistle is to get their attention, and then there's a series of whistles after that where she's clearly giving them information about like translating what you just said to her or some version of it. And then she nods, and you all continue on again.
I mean, I would assume they'd have a pretty simple whistle code for, like, be alert, possible danger. Like, there's, like, birds and shit have calls for that kind of thing.
Right, exactly, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't live anywhere near 1,000 years to develop signaling
No,
codes,
they don't. So you're walking for about another hour, and everyone seems a little bit on higher alert, and so they're a little bit quieter. And once in a while, Commander Surya kind of glances at you, and you also catch her looking at Vogun, but she doesn't say anything. She just continues on quietly.
Anytime she looks at me, if nothing's happened yet, I'll just I'll give a little shrug, like, you know, I didn't promise we were gonna see any action.
Right. Like,
I'm just a squishy wizard who casts Mage Armor when there's a chance we might see action. I was on a hair trigger for Mage Armor when that plant was eating her scouts. Let me tell you, like, I was ready to go.
So you're walking for like another hour, and it's kind of quiet and repetitive, and the tension seems to be kind of fading a bit as everyone's getting back into just the trot of going through this jungle. And you look off to the side, and there's a woman just standing there. She's 6 feet tall, dark skin, shaved head, long elven ears, and dressed in a regality that is stunning, and holding a long spear tipped with gold.
I will stop. Is she moving? Is she acknowledging our group at all? Is she looking at something else?
She's like standing 20 feet away, right next to a tree. So as you passed around it, you caught glance of her because she kind of unfolded around you as you moved around this tree.
Okay.
And she's just standing there looking at you and looking directly at you.
Look directly at me.
Not saying a word, not moving.
Is there anyone else, like, close to me in our group?
You're being passed by the commander.
Okay.
And the commander strides right past this woman, like within 10 feet, and doesn't even notice her. And she's not hiding. There's no reason why the commander wouldn't have seen her.
Okay. Greetings.
A smile breaks across the lips of this woman, and she nods ever so slightly, and she just smiles at you. And then she looks around the corner at the rest of your group that is pulling away from you.
Let's move on.
She gestures. Right? Yeah, she kind of gestures towards them. And do you start following your group again?
I think so. If she gestures their direction, she didn't say anything to me. No one else reacted to her. Aryunavar's a wizard. He's familiar with illusions. I don't think he's entirely convinced that she's real.
Sure.
But he also isn't ruling out the possibility that there's a little bit more going on. If Bay didn't hear the other noises, or the words that I was hearing, it could be that there's something specific to me going on, which is part of the other reason that he's a little bit on alert. I'm not convinced this person is tangible, so I'm not going to stand here and try and talk to her, interact with her or anything. And as she gestured at my party, I'm going to kind of jog to catch up with my party. But I'll be a little extra vigilant, kind of looking around and seeing if I'm seeing other, like, ghost elves or whatever weird shit's going on in this forest.
Sure. So you jog to catch up.
Yeah.
And you do, and then you return to a walking pace. And as soon as you return to a walking pace, this woman is at your side. Her hands clasped behind her back, her shoulders very straight and upright. Perfect posture. And her spear is now in her hands behind her back, pointed upwards.
Okay, and she's just walking along with us?
Specifically with you.
Specifically with me.
In very clear view of everyone, and no one has said a word.
And I'll just keep walking. I'm gonna look like a crazy person if I'm talking to an elf that nobody else can see in the middle of the group. So I'm just gonna kind of curiously keep walking with the party and see if this elven woman that only I can see or interact with does anything.
Silently walking next to you. Yeah, after 10 minutes, she's still just quietly walking. Occasionally, she glances up at you. If you glance back at her, she has a very warm smile.
All right.
Her eyes are playful, very intelligent. There is a presence about this woman. You sometimes would underestimate people. Everyone does, right?
Yeah.
But instantly, there's a presence about this woman that you respect. There is a regality to her.
Okay.
And you can't help but, look at her. She's interesting.
What's she... at the risk of making Kay ashamed of me, what is this woman wearing?
So she is wearing the finest leathers and even as you're right next to her now, and you can see like the gold rings around her wrist are beautifully crafted. Her spear itself is a work of art. Everything she is wearing just drips of craftsmanship and money, and it's old. There's an oldness to everything, almost ancient.
Interesting. I'm going to, as we're walking, I'm going to maneuver a little bit closer to her.
Sure.
And see if she keeps her distance or if she lets me approach.
So you move a little closer to her, and she looks up and smiles, and she just kind of quickly just steps directly through you. She just steps through you and comes out the other side.
Okay. All right.
She kind of laughs. Is that the answer you were looking for? Don't answer. They'll think you quite mad.
I nod. I speak primordial, which is kind of silly because primordial is actually 4 different languages, but nonetheless. I will, as we're walking along, I'll just kind of quietly say in probably Sylvan, she's an elf.
Birds talk bird. That makes sense.
In Orin, I'll just say the word for sword and see if she reacts at all to that word.
So you just say this word. She looks over at you and her eyebrows arch, and she repeats it back, and then says sword, and then says sword in Elven, and in Dwarven, and in Orc, and in other languages, and then says a bunch of words that you're assuming are other languages for sword, but you don't know them. And she laughs again, and it's just when she laughs, it's like a pearl of laughter. It's this perfect little high-pitched giggle, but with strength, and again, everything she does is just so damn charming, right? And she laughs and she says, "Yes, your sword. I assume you've come to claim it."
I will nod.
And she leans in this time, and now all of a sudden she's corporal. She's physical. She leans in and she kind of wraps her arm around yours, tucks it in between your arm and your side, and she kind of leans in, gently rests her head on your shoulder, and just points a little off the way that you're going. So if you're going straight north, she points a little bit. Well, actually, you'd be going straight west. So if you're going west, she points just a little bit north.
Okay.
It's right there. About another 20 minutes. Can't you feel it?
Can I?
The top of her head just touches the side of your neck, right?
Okay.
And there's a heat. You can feel the throbbing of the vein in her forehead, and there's a sweetness to her scent, and you take a breath and you feel your heart race, and all of a sudden you can see it. You just know it's there. There is this sword, this glimmering platinum and gold and silver sword with this incredible hilt and this emblem of this rising sun right where the hilt meets the actual blade. And it's one of the most perfect and glorious things you've ever seen. And then you're just back inside yourself and you stumble over a root, and I need you to roll dexterity.
Dexterity saving throw or just
roll a dexterity saving throw.
18 plus 4, 22.
Yeah, so you catch yourself fine, almost to the point where no one catches it. you now can feel the sword. There's like a sheen on your heartbeat. Whenever your heart beats, there's this sheen. It's hard for you to explain it any other way, but you can feel, where this sword is in relation to you, and you can hear a heartbeat from it that mimics yours.
All right.
And you can also hear Vogun more. Like you can hear him breathing, you can hear him moving, you can hear his heart. Like you're just more sensitive to all of it right now.
Okay. Because we're in a world where magic is a thing.
Yes.
And because I and...
a very big thing.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Omnipresent force everywhere, yeah.
And because I and a handful of other people I know have attempted this at least once in their life in the real world, I'm just going to attempt to summon the sword to my hand.
Okay, you're going to try and reach out to it?
I'm gonna see if I can feel it and I have this connection. I'm going to see if reaching out to it, I can just make it fly into my hand. I've definitely tried to turn the lights off telekinetically in real life before.
Of course.
It's because I've watched Star Wars. I'm like, I'm going to use the Force. But this is a world where magic exists. Like, this should be an actual feasible thing for someone to do, not just a...
So you reach out, and I would like you to roll a wisdom save.
Hey, I rolled an 18, so that's 20 total.
All right, so you reach out along this feeling, along this energy, right? And suddenly there's almost, when you get a magnet too close to another magnet, and all of a sudden there's that pull.
Yeah.
You just feel your arm kind of lurch out, and you kind of stumble forward a little bit, and it's hard for you to get your arm back down. There's such this strong connection, right?
I try and pull the sword to me, and I accidentally turn into Carrie Fisher,
Beatrice,
the Last Jedi, and just start Supermaning through the woods towards the sword.
Exactly, just yanks you that way.
Accidentally pull myself to it instead.
You feel where the sword is. You can sense it, and in your ears, you hear a roaring of blood. There's just this, rivers of blood in both ears and rivers of screaming in both ears, to the point where you feel like your head is going to split open, and you let out a gasp before you're able to release whatever the hell it is you were doing.
Okay.
And you're soaked in sweat, and you're breathing heavily, and Beatrice comes in behind you. She's like, are you okay?
Well,
you look awful.
That was dreadfully unsettling.
Wait a minute. Have you been poisoned? And she's lifting up your pant leg and look at your ankles and oh, you've been bitten by something. And she's got a hand on your forehead, and then she's already got a bottle of something out, and she's rubbing some kind of gel beneath your nose, and it smells terrible. And 5 minutes later, she's covered you in at least 7 different ointments.
Right. And we're not moving towards the sword.
You're gonna pass nearby the sword in the next 10 minutes. Yeah. You okay?
Come with me.
And she kind of looks over and she's like, well, we should probably stay with the group, right?
I can't imagine a stone giant's going to be that hard to find.
And she nods. She's like, okay, all right, as long as we stay together.
Of course.
And she follows you.
I move towards the sword.
Okay, and she talks about plants the whole way, and about how the roots are different but similar, and how she thinks that they need a little bit more light, even though the canopy is so choked. She doesn't quite understand how that works, and she's just going on and on and on. And you eventually, it's not so much that you drone her out, it's that you just can't hear her.
Right.
Because this single note that you've been hearing is so loud. So imagine a heartbeat, but every time that heartbeat hit, it was just this note rising.
Okay. And does my connection to whatever this is, does it give me an idea how close I am? Am I
You feel like if you just parted this tree,
okay,
and as you push this branch back in a small clearing, probably maybe 200 feet across, and it's blasted. So there is a crater in front of you. It goes down about 50 feet into a pretty perfect bowl. There are a lot of vines and things growing over it. So this was made some time ago, but still recent enough that the evidence of it hasn't vanished.
Right.
So there is what is clearly an impact site in front of you, and in the center of it, in the very bottom of this crater, where there is literally nothing growing in what is otherwise a completely overgrown forest, is a perfect, untarnished sword. Point down, buried about halfway into the ground, and then pointing straight towards the sky.
Sure, yeah. Your standard sword in the stone setup.
Oh my God.
I imagine her like slowly pulling out like a sketchbook to like
right. And she turns to you and she grabs your arm, like very excited. She's like, did you know this was here? How did you know this was here?
I hold my arm back out again. I sort of gesture towards her like it pulled me here.
And she looks up at you and she looks a little worried. And she looks back at it, and then she raises a hand, and her hand glows for a moment and then flares incredibly bright, like a brilliant flash of light that she has to turn her eyes away from. And she, and then when she does get her eyes back open, they're wide with fear. And she's like, oh, that's a really powerful thing. We should tell the others. And she turns and she's like rubbing her eyes and she's kind of stumbling a bit because she's apparently, she's still kind of flash blinded, but she clearly detected magic on that and is startled by what she has found.
Beatrice.
And she kind of fumbles for you, but she finds your arm and she's like, yeah, we should tell the others.
We should, but why make them come here when we can bring it to them? We said we were going to stay together. And I'll sort of put her hand on like a tree for her to brace herself on, and I'll take a step forward towards the sword.
Okay. She does so, especially because she can't see.
Right.
And as you're taking steps towards the sword, like every step feels like you're stepping through. It feels like air, and you're moving through it like you would move through air, but it feels like the closer you get, the slower you're going. And the last couple steps towards the center, even though your feet are moving as fast as they should be,
right,
and you feel like you're covering as much ground as you normally would, they just seem to take forever until your hand clasps around the hilt. And in that second, you are flooded with these visions of an Ani with walls raising around her as the land floods everywhere, a Rylend exploding in a volcano as lava runs down her sides. You're seeing a storm bigger than anything you could possibly imagine. Its walls bearing down on everything as you pull back and pull back from the planet until you just see this singular eye in a massive world-covering storm that has completely consumed everything else, and you just hear so many screams. And then you wake up. And we're going to hold right there.